Welcome to the Chase Med Search Podcast, your place for discussions involving hiring and recruiting for sales, clinical specialists, and other commercial positions in the medical device technology sector, where we talk about ways to get in, stay in, and improve within this niche of the industry that we all love so much. We also cover technological advancements, leadership discussions, and interview current medical device representatives that have some pretty unique backgrounds. I'm your host, Jordan Chase, taking you on a guided tour of my last 20 years of experience working in the medtech sector. Let's get on into it. All right, welcome to a special Thanksgiving episode of the Chase Med Search Podcast. I'm excited to welcome an old friend of mine. He's not old, but our friendship is old. John McDonald. He resides in Denver, and John and I worked together at Medtronic for over a decade. I was his human resources manager for much of it, and later became an internal recruiting partner for him and helped him build teams. We worked through many different employee situations, and John's incisive ability to identify a situation, actions needed to be taken was always impressive, as was his good humor and grace toward everyone he worked with. It's no exaggeration to say John was one of the best sales representatives and sales directors to ever walk through the hallowed halls of Medtronic. He worked in the deep brain stimulation business, eventually serving as Western Regional Sales Director before he moved to Medtronic's stroke business, where he finished as Director for Stroke Therapies and Neurovascular. I never told him this until now, but there are particular sales managers I have worked with that I view as mentors in any number of ways. John is right at the top of my list. You can read books to improve, and you should, and you can learn from some of the very best. I was fortunate to work with John. I asked John to be my guest in particular because the Thanksgiving time means a lot to him, to most of us, and he was known for sharing two articles with his friends. One, an excerpt from William Bradford's diary, and the other is an article entitled "And the Fair Land" by Vermont Royster, who was the editor of the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal from 1958 to 1971. They're companion pieces in a sense. These two articles have meant a lot to John and those who have read them, and I wanted to have him on this special episode of my podcast to discuss them and this time of year in general. So John, it's Thanksgiving time, so I have to say, your Steelers are looking pretty good this year.
9-0, Jordan.
I know you know. How far, is this for real? How far do you think they can actually go?
You know, it's the best start. Well, first of all, thank you for that that very kind introduction. That truly touches my heart, and I appreciate you saying those kind words. But on to the more important topic of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Best start in franchise history. Even during their Super Bowl heydays in the 70s, they never started out 9-0. I think 8-0, or actually 7-0 was their best start. So, I think they're guaranteed to make the playoffs, and then it's a jump ball. Yeah,
they look impressive. My Cowboys have struggled a little bit, but I still, am ready for them to go 9-7. And win right through the playoffs onto the Super Bowl. So
that is truly hope over reality.
Absolutely. But we'll, we in Texas, we're diehards down here. So, we'll just stick with it, keep riding. You're a University of Texas alum, and I suppose there was an interesting note I saw that I bet you saw this week too, that Matthew McConaughey said he's not opposed to running for governor of Texas someday. So that probably got every Longhorn fan's attention, did it not?
You know what? I did see that excerpt, and I don't know what Matthew's politics are, but I would certainly, you know what? It would be a fun campaign to watch. Just put it that way.
Absolutely. That would be just an incredible campaign. It would be epic. And, I can see it now. Vote for me. It'd be a lot cooler if you did,
Hey, we've had a professional wrestler as the governor of Minnesota. We got a reality TV star who was president of the United States. Why not McConaughey for governor of Texas?
Absolutely. So, well, anyway, Thanksgiving, one of my favorite times of the entire year. There's so many great childhood memories I have of it. My mother, my grandmother would spend the prior day cooking. They would cook on Thanksgiving as well. I mean, the food was amazing. I mean, could go through the list. It's endless. We invited an older friend over who was widowed, and she always came, and she was a bunch of fun. Katie Walston was her name. And just so many great memories. What stands out to you growing up about Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving to me, and like you, Jordan, I mean, it is my favorite holiday because it all revolves around family and gathering and friends and food. And, the fact that it's always on a 4-day weekend, I think makes it special because you have that dedicated time to just relax and enjoy and really, really fulfill. What the experience is supposed to be. But Thanksgiving to me it's really the most American of all the holidays, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there is nothing like Thanksgiving anywhere else in the world. I mean, Christians across the world celebrate Christmas. Muslims across the world celebrate Ramadan. The Jewish
Yep.
faith celebrates Yom Kippur. But
Mhm.
it's really only Thanksgiving that is uniquely American holiday, and it touches me. It brings me into the holiday season. It brings me into the holiday spirit, and it gives me time to really reflect on everything that the blessings of God and the graces that I have around me, and to truly be thankful for where I am and what I have in this world. So it is
Absolutely.
absolutely my favorite.
Yeah, it is just an amazing time. I think that I have more nostalgia around Thanksgiving than any other holiday. There was something about it. It's always on a Thursday. Growing up, we could only get 4 channels on the TV. Most of us in the town I grew up with could only get 4 or 5 channels. And we're all watching the same thing, Peanuts, the Peanut special on Thanksgiving, and for the same football game, sort of uniquely all tied together in my mind. What do the Thanksgiving preparations look like this time of year around the McDonald house? You've got 2 girls. I'm going to brag for you because I know you won't. They're
Right.
both swimming at the Division I level, and you've got a West Pointer in the house. This is pretty special time, I imagine, for you guys.
Yep. So I do. I actually just to correct you, I have three beautiful
3.
ladies.
Oh,
So and all three of them are in the pool thanks to their the tireless efforts of their mother getting them to practice at 5:30 in the morning while I was either traveling or more likely still in bed snoring.
yeah.
But yeah, I've got a daughter who graduated at the University of Nebraska and swam for them. A daughter who is going to graduate this year from Tulane,
Mhm.
also a swimmer. And then, as you mentioned, I've got a cadet at the United States Military Academy at West Point who we're very proud of.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
2020 though, Jordan, is like everything. This is a crazy year. So Thanksgiving, there's been a hand grenade dropped into the middle of the turkey and the celebration. The governor of Washington issued a kind of a very restrictive stay-at-home order to
Mm.
where my daughter, if she were to come back for Thanksgiving, would have to quarantine for 14 days upon her return
Oh,
to Washington. So she's unable to do that. She's working as an emergency medical technician
yeah.
in preparation for applying to the University of Washington Physician Assistant School. So Anna, unfortunately, is not going to be here.
Mm.
Likewise, my cadet West Point is shut down, and they are quarantined to post. So she will not be here. But
Oh,
thankfully, my daughter from New Orleans, Tulane,
yeah.
will be home. So this is the first time, Jordan, in oh my gosh, in 23 years that the entire family, will not be together.
Mm.
Chalk it up to just being a crazy COVID year and something that I'm looking to put behind me and in my rearview mirror.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, I didn't even think about that, but it makes sense hearing, what's going on, and they're also active and spread out all over the country, and they're high functioning, and they've been affected by this. It's really sad, you think
It is
about it,
sad.
but there's so many families going through this, you know. Are you going to do Zoom or anything like that?
We stay in video conference, which there's a couple of good things about COVID, Jordan.
Hmm.
The technology platforms have improved greatly to allow for that virtual presence, if not
Yeah.
a real presence. The other great thing about COVID was, for the first time, and probably won't ever happen again, when all of my daughters were home, when the pandemic really was at its zenith in the March timeframe, I had about 90 consecutive dinners with all three of my adult children around my table because they were home from school or work, wherever. And it was something that I reflect upon, saying it was a beautiful time, and it's something that is likely to never happen again, as evidenced by the fact that we're not even together, as a family over Thanksgiving holiday.
Yeah. Wow. So you kind of got the reverse. You were able to spend a concentrated, significant amount of time with him during the quarantine.
That was
And
beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, that's great. Well, it may sound a little cliche, John, but what are you thankful for this time of year of our 2020?
And it's not cliche, right? I mean, you have to step back and pause and just reflect for a moment on the graces that are bestowed upon you. When I think about what I'm thankful for, it's obviously first and foremost is my family. My
Yeah.
beautiful wife of 30 years, raising three, as you mentioned, high functioning, beautiful women who are about to set foot into the world and create their own lives and create their own memories. I'm thankful for the many friendships that I have, both with you, with my professional partners, with the neighbors that surround me here in Evergreen, Colorado. I'm thankful for my health. I'm thankful. I always have a saying that I borrowed from one of our coworkers, Tim Kroc.
Yeah.
That other people would love to have my problems.
He did always say that, didn't he?
But it's always touched me, right? And it's true. It's like, yeah, I mean, what would you possibly complain about? Just take a look around, and what is there to complain about in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah. Yeah, it really puts it all in perspective, doesn't it?
It does.
22 years, if my math is right, at Medtronic. What a great run, leaving on a high note, retiring while still enjoying tremendous success there. How does it all feel looking back on it? What stands out to you the most?
Well, first of all, it's a little surreal, right? Each day or each month, I get a little bit more realization that, hey, you are retired. Your working career is substantially done. Now, I'm doing a startup with some Medtronic, some also, I should say, retired folks.
Yeah.
But I'm done with my working career, right? I mean, the days of 60, 70 hour weeks and 120 nights a year at a Marriott, 100 segments on Southwest, that's behind me. So I'm kind of turning the page and looking forward to the next chapter. But I valued my time with Medtronic. I absolutely loved working for that company. And principally, it was because the people, yourself included, that I was surrounded with, right? I mean, a company is just that. It's a Wall Street ticker. It's a big building, in a faraway place, but it's the people that you associate with day in and day out that really makes it special. And I was fortunate with Medtronic, to have been surrounded by an elite, classy group of individuals that really were all fighting the good fight, and it was something that I'm thankful for at this time of year too. When I think about it.
Yeah, it really is the people, isn't it, that make a company what it is. And there were some of the absolute best people I've ever worked with or ever even known in my entire life that were there, and are friends of mine today. I'm grateful for that. First day retired. What do you remember that day? What did it? How late did you sleep in, and what did it feel like when you woke up?
I do have a sense of what I was feeling back then, because you have to understand that while I am retired, I was given, or I really wasn't given an option to retire. We had a reduction in force in the neurovascular business. So myself, along with my 6 managers that I hired, along with about another 30 reps, we were displaced. So I could have elected to find something else within the Medtronic family. But you know what? I was 56 and a half years old. My target retirement date was always to be 57. They provided me with a nice exit package. So I said, you know what? I'm done. I guess I'm done. And it was weird. I mean, it is truly weird to do something. My working life, I worked for 33 years, never had more than a 10-day vacation in those 33 years. But you wake up one morning and you realize that, hey, you don't have to be on a conference call. You don't have to be going to the airport. You don't have to really answer to anyone except my wife, of course. It was liberating, but it was also a bit unsettling, right? I mean, there was some anxiety as you're stepping into a new chapter without really a plan, because for me, it happened rather suddenly, as most reductions in force do. So it was a little bit unsettling. But as the weeks and the months rolled past, I got much more comfortable in my post-Medtronic life. And I joke now, I said, if I'd have known retirement is this much fun, I would have done it 20 years earlier.
Wouldn't we all? That's why I keep buying my kids' lottery tickets.
Exactly.
Here you go, guys. What are our numbers today? So, you have engineered for yourself a pretty active retirement. You mentioned, or you touched on, I think, Speech 5. Maybe you didn't say it, but I know that's something you're involved in. What do they do? What's the target audience for that product, and the core message of the company that you'd love to have more widely known?
Thank you. Yeah. So it is Speech 5, and this is a startup, if you will, that was spun out of the Purdue Foundry. It's kind of their technology incubator. There is a professor of speech called Jessica Huber.
Purdue University, we should say, right? Not is it the pharma company or is it the university?
Oh, no. You're right. Right. It is
Okay.
Purdue University. Yeah. Not not the OxyContin.
Just trying to clarify. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
But Jessica was, being a professor of speech, was very aware of a reflex in the brain that's common to all humans. And it's not all humans, it's non-human primates. It's been observed in whales. It's been observed in birds. It's called the Lombard effect, or the Lombard reflex. And it's really, as one movement disorder specialist described to me recently, said, it's the cocktail party reflex. So if you walk into a cocktail party with your spouse, there's groups of people chatting, there's some ambient noise in the background. Without you having to intentionally do anything, your brain is automatically going to recognize that you're in a noisy environment. And in order for you to be heard, you need to project your voice louder. So we have an over-the-ear device that has an accelerometer on it, that when a Parkinson's patient speaks, and Jordan, as you know, dealing with PD patients from our time at Medtronic, one of the severe consequences of the disease is people lose their ability to speak loud.
Mm-hmm.
And once you lose your ability to speak loud, it can result in some social isolation, and you kind of withdraw from your spouse, your primary communication partner. You avoid talking on the phone. You avoid going out, in public, because people can't hear you. So it's a very, very debilitating side effect of the disease. So this device, which is an over-the-ear appliance that projects a stimulus into the ear only when the Parkinson's patient speaks, and causes them to speak 30 to 50% louder. So,
what
it's
a
a space.
What a gift.
It truly is a gift, and it's a space that I love, having spent 18 of my 23 years in working with Parkinson's in the Deep Brain Stimulation franchise. So it's kind of a nice synergy as I exit Medtronic and end my career. I'm now going back to where I started, in the Parkinson's space.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing product. Still making a difference in patients' lives in your career, so to speak, your second half, if you will. Let's talk about these two articles of yours for a little bit here. And I've heard of them. I know I've read them over the years. I got a chance to look at them again this week, and they are really special. And the Wall Street Journal, and I didn't know this, has published the Vermont Royster article since 1961, every Thanksgiving. And
that's correct.
There's nothing that says repetition quite like Thanksgiving. It's going to come every year, and we're going to do many of the same things. And the Wall Street Journal is going to publish this article, and it is really good. And it's uncanny how relevant it is for our day and age. I see why they keep publishing this thing, but we'll dive into that in a second. William Bradford, that article, it's a journal entry of his, right?
It is.
Yeah.
So it was Nathaniel Morton was the chronicler, the scribe, if you will, for the Plymouth colony, and he excerpted from William Bradford's journal, what is now called the Desolate Wilderness. And you're right. I mean, this has been published as a companion piece, a tandem house editorial, every year since 1961. So this year, I will, on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, go to my my local grocery store, pick up a physical copy of the Wall Street Journal, and then I put it aside. I put it on my desk, and every Thanksgiving morning, as part of my tradition, I will open up the Wall Street Journal, go to the house editorial page, and read both of these articles. And it's a tradition that I've been doing for some 20 years now, but it never ceases to raise the hackles of my skin and give me a tingly feeling. And even though I've read these articles 1,000 times.
Yeah.
But each Thanksgiving day, it appears anew.
There's a comfort in that tradition, that's for sure. And I may have the little Chase people read this too this Thanksgiving. In fact, I will. the Shakespearean sounding language in that article by Bradford. He was a Puritan, so we could expect a verse from the Bible and references to praying and all of that. What is it in that article that captivates you so much? And I should say, I'm sorry to interrupt, but William Bradford was the first governor of the Plymouth colony. He was reelected 30 times until his death. So this man, he survived. He was a survivor.
Right.
But tell me what captivates you so much about it.
So it is captivating, but as a standalone piece, it would be captivating. But the fact that this is a companion piece, so if you open up the Wall Street Journal editorial page, you're going to see on the top the desolate wilderness, and then right below it, and the fair land. So you have to read them in tandem. But when I look and when I read the desolate wilderness, I mean, if you could transport yourself back to the 17th century, and a group of people that are leaving their homes in Amsterdam is where they left
Delfshaven,
for the New World.
Yes, Delfshaven,
exactly. But think about what it took for these people a true leap of faith to be crossing, a broad ocean, a journey which was not guaranteed to be successful, right? The crossing of itself, and then arriving in the New World, which was recently discovered only 150 years or so before, and they've left behind everything that they knew. Took it as an article of faith. They were searching for a new life in a new world that would guarantee them their religious liberties. So when I think about the mindset of the Pilgrims, the Puritans on the Mayflower, crossing this ocean and arriving, in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and there were no inns to comfort them. There was no food prepared to welcome them. They were, and this was in the fall, right? So the harsh New England winters were going to be fast coming upon them. But they had the courage, they had the faith that that God would bless them and take care of them, and their journey would be successful. But it's stunning to me. I don't know that I would ever be brave enough to embark on such a journey with an unknown end. It would be like, okay, John, you could be the first passenger aboard Elon Musk's rocket to Mars. Are you ready to go? And it's like, no, I don't think so. I don't think I have the courage to do that.
Yeah.
But these brave people did just that, really. And as the companion piece in the Fair Land will tell you, that it's because of them that we can be thankful, this autumn for all the blessings that we currently have.
Well, for America, nearly half of those passengers died the first winter of 1620. There were 102, and 45 of them died that first winter. Most of them within the first 3 months. There's a lot of fortitude that you draw reading this article. Resilience. I can't imagine how cold it had to be on that ship. The conditions, they say, were wretched. I think he mentions that in the diary. But there's a particularly moving part where he talks about the Reverend Pastor falling down on his knees, and they all with him, with watery cheeks, commended them with the most fervent prayers unto the Lord. And with mutual embraces and many tears, they took their leaves of one another, which proved to be the last leave to many of them.
Exactly.
That really stood out to me. It's poetic, it's sobering, and they stepped completely out into the unknown. I mean, this was just, they had never been there, and off they went. When you were giving this particular article out, what kind of feedback did you get back on it? What speaks to people over the years that you found with this?
And the reason that I continued to send this out year after year was because I did get positive feedback. People had, it always surprised me. I mean, you get caught in your own little bubble. You think that everybody reads the same things that you read. They listen to the same music, or they have the same political persuasion. But I was struck by the fact that so many people had never heard or read these two articles. And, it's been published every year since 1961. So we're going on 60 years now that this has been in print. But I received a lot of positive feedback, and it was kind of the sober, reflective feedback saying, hey, thank you for turning me on to this. I enjoyed both pieces, and some people have made it a part of their Thanksgiving tradition, even to this day. So I think the reason that I sent it out every year was because I got that positive dopamine hit that, hey, somebody else felt good about this and turn around and thank me for it.
Yeah, that's great. I was just talking to someone this morning, walking my dog who wants to break into medical sales. And I was telling them, allow me to dispel you of most of the altruistic reasons why you want to get in. This is a very tough business. It's very hard nosed. It's extraordinarily competitive. You want to get in it for the right reasons, which is to help people and all that. But the business of medicine is business. And, it would seem like this could resonate exceptionally well with folks in our niche of the industry because there's so much resilient quotient, if you will, that's required to succeed in these jobs.
That's a great observation, and I concur 100%. I mean, if you when I was going through my career, Jordan, I learned that you hired people based on three immutable characteristics, right? Are they smart enough to learn what the job is about? Do they have a work ethic that's going to allow them to get up every morning and put the training that they've been given to practice? And then finally, do they have a good attitude, right? Because you can be the smartest guy in the room, you can have the greatest work ethic, but if you have a poor attitude, if you're not resilient, if you're not willing to be able to take the highs and the lows, you're not going to make it in this industry, and you probably wouldn't make it in most industries.
Yeah.
But it is that you have to have that tough nose, that tough minded, gut it out personality if you're going to make a career and a successful one in med device.
Yeah. Absolutely. I concur. And I think that's one of the things reading it, I was thinking about, all those, hey, we lost the contract and we just hired you. And you're stepping into, what am I stepping into? Or we just hired you and your entire team quit and went to the competitor. And there's just so many situations over the years that I've been impressed with medical salespeople that I've known and people in our industry that face seemingly insurmountable odds. And yet, because of those three characteristics you just mentioned, they possess them or they develop them quite rapidly and succeed. And it's one of the reasons I get up and do what I do every day, because I'm inspired by the people that I interact with. It never gets old. I love my weekends, but I can't wait for Monday because I'm always getting something from the people I interact with that do what they do.
Good for you. Good for you.
It's great. So, and the fair land, the companion piece. I mean, there's so many great lines in this article. I wish I could read the whole thing. I'm sure it's copyrighted, but it is literally the perfect companion piece written 341 years after landing at Plymouth Rock.
Right.
And it is so insightful to the day and age that we live in. I mean, it's optimistic, but not foolishly so. It's realistic about the challenges we face as a nation, but it's not despairing. So it's just sober-minded and hopeful all at the same time. When you read this article as the companion piece, what do you draw from it?
Oh, I love this piece, and it gives me chills every time I read it. So a couple of things to put it into perspective, as you correctly pointed out. So it was written by Vermont Royster, the longtime editor of the Journal, and it was first published in 1961. But it is as relevant today as it was back in 1961. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that really touches me, Jordan, is that the piece is so timeless because the issues that Vermont Royster is describing in 1961, really, they're the same issues that we're faced with today. He talks about the savage face of war, and this was in 1961, so this was before really the Vietnam conflict had begun in earnest. But he talks about society being so polarized, and when I think about him writing this 60 years ago, I kind of scratch my head and say, hey, we're dealing with the same issues today, right? But this article, Jordan, is something that I love reading every year because of its timelessness. But there are so many quotes, there's so many passages that just really make the hair on my arms stand on end because it's hopeful, right? I mean,
it is hopeful. Yeah. He measures and he praises, the landscape of America, talks about the geography, and then there's this turn about the unfulfilled promise where he says, America, though many know it not, is one of the great underdeveloped countries of the world. What it reaches for exceeds by far what it has grasped.
Isn't that a beautiful phrase?
It's just an absolutely Great line. What it reaches for exceeds by far what it has grasped. I was reading it at midnight again last night. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I'm just like, wow.
And isn't that an apt description of America, right? America is
It
really
is.
nothing more than an idea, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
it's an idea. It's an idea that was born out of the courage of those people that left Amsterdam to arrive in Plymouth, and it's evolved. But America is always reaching for more than what it possesses, and I think
Yeah,
that's the beauty of our culture.
I think so, and I think in all the wrestlings that our country has gone through this year, politically and socially, and all of that, I think, when I read this article and appraise it, it is hopeful in that America has the mechanisms to have this conversation and have these struggles and work them out in ways differently than you see in Russia or Venezuela or North Korea or China. You know, we are different and we're doing this differently, I think, in some ways than these other countries that don't have, these foundational principles that we have that allow for this kind of civil challenges that we're facing. He
Agree.
says in one of these things that, he talks about the challenges, all of which apply today, including infrastructure in need of repair here and there. He says, or when in the face of these challenges, they turn for leadership to men in high places, only to find those men as frail as any others. And I think we've seen that no matter what stripe of political spectrum we're on, you know, we're all looking for some sort of leader that can fix it all at once, or a leadership team that can fix it all at once. And he suggests looking in a different place for help. He says, we remind ourselves that in the richness of this country was not born in the resources of the earth, though they be plentiful, but in the men that took its measure. And I would add
Exactly.
men and women.
Yep. Yes. Of course.
To
Of
update
course.
appropriately. Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing piece of work. Anything else stand out to you about it?
It does. So, I mean, he talks about and again, this is 1961. He
Yeah.
talks about the lack of civility.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm impressed, in the year 2020. Also, I worry about our lack of civility. I'm concerned about the lack of civility in our public discourse and our political discourse. It seems that it's more and more difficult to become friends and associates with people who don't hold the same political views, and I find that to be tragic, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we need to have politics has its place, and we do look to leaders and find them to be as frail as any other men. But I
Mm-hmm.
think there needs to be we need to rethink the importance and the place that we put politics in our lives. But when I
Yeah.
read this article, the quote, the line, the passage that stands out to me more than any others is when he says that we can remind ourselves that for all of our social discord, right,
Mm-hmm.
we yet remain the longest enduring society of free men governing themselves without benefit of kings or dictators. And being so, we are the marvel and the mystery of the world. And
Mm-hmm.
for that enduring liberty is no less a blessing than the abundance of the earth. I
Yeah.
mean, when you think about that, Jordan, we are a 250-year or so experiment, but we are the longest enduring society of free men governing themselves without a king or a dictator. I mean, that is something to cherish and to hold special. That
It's
is America.
extraordinary. It is extraordinary and unparalleled, I think, in the history of the world. I don't know another country that ever that I'm aware of existed like this. When we talk about political discourse, I think of my mother and my stepdad, who were, I loved them to death. They were folks of the left persuasion. My mother was a member of Students for the Democratic Society at the University of Michigan. Her whole life really was very engaged with, politics of the Democrat Party, and yet they would have dinner with a friend of mine's mom and dad, who were the polar opposite. The dad had served in Vietnam and had come home and had been treated horribly in some ways by Vietnam protesters, and yet they routinely got together for dinner and would sit there and debate ideas and laugh and have a few drinks and eat a good meal. And they knew they had their differences. Everybody knew it. They talked about their differences openly and were great friends all the way until, my mom and my stepdad eventually passed away. But they remained lifelong friends and valued that friendship and didn't talk past one another. They're
Right.
very respectful of each other's ideas and interacted with them. And, I always looked at that growing up as kind of a model of what America could be, as people coming from different opposite viewpoints and being able to come together and really talk about those and still remain friends. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's a thing of the past, but I got to believe there's people out there that do that still.
Well, I think that speaks to the civility of maybe a time that has passed. The old adage is, the things you should never bring up in, civil discourse is religion or politics.
Yeah.
Well, around my dinner table growing up, that was probably the only thing we ever talked about was religion and politics. My mother loved a good debate, and
Yeah.
it was really just it was just the engaging in the conversation. I think that she appreciated more than anything else. Obviously, we weren't going to change anybody
Yeah.
else's mind if they had strong convictions. But
Mhm.
perhaps you'd walk away from that conversation with something to think about and say, something that may challenge your current view of reality. So I've always enjoyed discourse of, different political opinions,
Mhm.
because I find that there's growth, there's opportunities to grow. They say growth only occurs at the margins, or growth only occurs at the precipice of failure. When you have to put your ideas out there and you realize that, maybe I haven't thought this out as well as I would
Yeah.
have liked,
Mhm.
it can lead to growth and it can lead to change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna read this one line here because it really stood out. Had the men and women, I'll add in parentheses, from Delfshaven been daunted by the troubles they saw around them, then we could not this autumn be thankful for a fair land.
Gives me chills. Yeah,
Yeah. I'm thankful for a fair land this Thanksgiving. John, how about you?
I'm always thankful, Jordan. Like I said, other people would love to have my problems, and John McDonald is making his way in this world just fine. But it's because I've been so blessed. I've been blessed by marrying a lovely woman. I've been blessed by the children that we've raised. I've been blessed by the friends that I've had, the professional associations that I've been engaged in. I've got a lot to be thankful for. And if it wasn't for those pilgrims that took off from Delfshaven, in the early 1600s, we wouldn't be sitting here talking today.
Yeah.
It's something that truly gives me pause.
Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is John McDonald, one of my best work friends I ever made. John, thanks for being on.
Jordan, it was a pleasure. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Chase MedSearch podcast. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in. I want to thank my guests for coming on today's show. I hope that you got a lot of value in the information and experiences that they shared with us. You can subscribe to the show at chasemedsearch.com and follow all of the appropriate links to subscribe through iTunes or Spotify. And don't forget to drop a like so we can expand the audience of our show. But I'm also curious to hear your thoughts on this episode, so if you have any questions or feedback, feel free to contact the show's email at podcast@chasemedsearch.com. You can reach out to us there to share your experiences in the medical device industry, or even leave a suggestion for a future episode topic. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you have a great week, make a difference for patients and customers, stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time on the Chase MedSearch podcast. Chase MedSearch is providing this podcast as a public service. Reference to any specific product, individual, or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by Chase MedSearch. Any views and opinions shared by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Chase MedSearch or any of its employees or contractors.